Conspiracy Lulu is back again. In the last video, we talked about how potentially the world leaders of this new world reserve currency may not be that bad and not acting deliberately to keep us down, right? We talked about the WEF yesterday. Today, we're going to talk about all these precious metals and how they're going to be backed to XRP or whatever the world reserve currency is. We saw a recent video from Black Swan Capitalist interviewing Simon Hunt. I do believe he has already interviewed Simon Hunt again by the time I'm actually recording this, but I haven't got the answers. I had asked Black Swan Capitalist to ask Simon Hunt some very gold specific questions, and he's going to come back to me on that, so more content will come. But this really all comes back to a conversation that I had with T's Crypto Spot on the No Emotion podcast, which if you haven't seen that episode, that was fire. And as many would say, that was spicy information that came out in that podcast. Also, the Black Swan Capitalist podcast. The podcast is great. Go and watch all the episodes if you haven't. And if you want to see these short clips of all the golden nuggets that were released in these podcasts, subscribe to No Emotion Clips. The link to that is in the description as well. And T and I were discussing the idea of distribution. Now, if we have basically an entity or a couple of entities at the top, being Bank of International Settlements, World Economic Forum and World Bank, all the people that we view as the bad guys, if they are essentially controlling the world reserve currency and the CBDCs, and we need to have this revaluation of all the precious metals in order to link them by something called a backing, right? So you have, as Simon Hunt says, you have about 20 commodities, all kind of averaged out. It's a basket of commodities, and that is what backs the world reserve currency. It's basically showing this importance of having gold and the precious metals. And obviously all these countries have been accumulating gold like there's no tomorrow. And considering that the ranking in terms of risk, the investment risk of gold moved from the highest risk tier to the lowest risk tier without telling anyone, basically. That literally happened as they were accumulating all their gold. It makes me think of one thing, and that is, how many banks are there in the world? Well, we established in that interview that there was about 25,000 banks in the world. And the typical translation into how many financial institutions there are usually times that number by 10. So there's actually 250,000 financial institutions in the world. However, there are only 49, 48, 50 billion tokens available that aren't in escrow. So then you take 50 billion and you divide that among 250,000, you get a very small number of XRP per institution, right? And so then you have to think, if you've got someone running the world like the World Economic Forum, and they are deciding on what goes forward and what doesn't, and there's one currency that rules the world, they control that one currency. They can also control the regulations behind how much JP Morgan, for example, gets in XRP, right? How much Barclays gets in XRP. And this will be based on, the amount of money moved and the amount required. Then you can see how much XRP would be required, because I do believe that these guys at the top know a rough estimate of what the price will be of XRP, so they'll know how much XRP to distribute. I think all of that is very real. They know all of this information, but of course they can't tell you because that throws off their control over 9 billion people, as I mentioned in the last video. And to me, this kind of explains and kind of answers, or could actually provide somewhat of an answer to people who say, well, if the banks were getting in, why haven't they bought up all of the supply? They definitely can buy all of the supply, especially at the prices we're seeing right now. And there's a two-pronged answer to that. One of those prongs is that they're using the private ledger to basically, they've been testing XRP and Ripple technology. We know that's been in the documentation, but maybe they're stepping that up a little bit using the private ledger before the private and the public ledger start to blend, so they get use of the on-demand liquidity, which is the main thing basically that Ripple offers, aside from the XRP ledger. But if they were told from higher authorities, like the World Economic Forum, no one's allowed to buy any XRP just yet, because we're trying to figure out, based on the revaluation of gold, how much XRP all of the different countries need, how much we can allow each entity, each country even, to have of this asset. And we make that calculation based on which banks operate in your jurisdiction, the volume of transactions that those banks actually settle and move on a daily basis. And that calculation gives the WEF an understanding and regulatory oversight of how much these central banks, financial institutions, smaller banks, all are allowed to have in XRP. That could explain why the whole supply hasn't been bought up by the likes of JP Morgan already. It could be that they're waiting for that go-ahead of how much XRP they're actually allowed. Where the XRP comes from, whether it comes from the remaining amount in the market, I kind of struggle to believe that, because that's a fluctuating amount, right? People in retail are buying and selling. So if you wanted to distribute exactly down to how many tokens were available left into all the institutions, it wouldn't be possible because that amount fluctuates, right? Unless they've got some sort of buffering, which is maybe the case too. Or it could be potential that some is released from the escrow account that Ripple holds, which is a stable and controlled amount, about 50 billion. This would also reduce the power, the seeming power that Ripple have over XRP by no longer having a monopoly on the XRP and the escrow, right? Because as long as they hold 50 billion and one token, they have more tokens than there are publicly available, right? So if you use the escrow money, XRP, to distribute from within there to all of the institutions to how much XRP they're allowed to have, as said by the World Economic Forum, you're not only distributing perfectly across the board, but you're also reducing Ripple's power and centralization, or perceived centralization, in that whole system. And I think that's quite a good way to do it, to be honest. This explains all the FUD that's coming up, the library case that closes, and how everyone all of a sudden said Ripple's going to lose now after everyone's been so confident that Ripple's going to win, like 99% confident, and all of a sudden you've got big influencers coming out saying it's all over for Ripple, the library case was basically the same thing as the Ripple case. Get out of here, come on now. That's not all this FUD coming out, FTX going down, and the fact that Gary Gensler and his team met with FTX and Binance literally weeks before this crash. What's going on here? This is like literally, this feels orchestrated. I can't even think of another word. It just feels orchestrated. And it relates back to my part one of this video. These guys have been pulling strings of billions of people, understanding the ripple effect of these little movements that they make at that level, because when you affect the money, you affect the banks, you affect the people, you control the people in the end, and any moves that they make, they know how that ripple effect works. They know how it will affect 9 billion people. Yes, some people will starve to death because they don't have any money. Yes, some rich people will get even richer. Yes, some people in the middle class will move up to the 1%. Some people in the 1% will move down into the middle class. They understand how their actions affect things like this. They really, truly understand it. And so is it far-fetched to think that they already understand how this is going to work, this whole new system? And do you think they also understand how it's going to be distributed? And I think the revaluation of gold and precious metals and the one world reserve currency and that one controlling power at the top who controls all the money, it just seems right for me that they would control how much each one of these institutions in XRP is allowed to hold in order to process those payments based on the backing of those assets. That was potentially very convoluted, and maybe it sounds like I'm from an insane right now, but that's kind of the picture that's being painted in my mind. And I don't know. I think I'm gonna need some time to rest or something after all of this digging. There's plenty more to learn. I appreciate that you have all been on this journey with me. The Discord is closed for the public. The memberships has been growing 20 to 30 to 40 people every single day, which is crazy. It's the only way to get into the Discord now and access to all those private channels. Of course, if you are going to buy some XRP before this thing pops off, it's not financial advice, I'm not telling you to buy it, but my research leads me to think that it's pretty good, although you have to do your own research and understand it yourself. BitGet seems like a really good place to do it. They are great over there. Regardless of where you're from, you can buy on BitGet and move directly to cold storage wallet. And if you don't have a cold storage wallet, come on, what are you doing? Seriously, we've seen FTX closing down. Like literally everyone's money on FTX, poof, into thin air. Who didn't get affected by the FTX thing? Yes, everybody who had cold storage wallet and only holds their digital assets or the keys to their digital assets on a cold wallet. I use the Ledger Nano X, it's the first link in the description. If you didn't watch part one, go and watch part one now. If you didn't watch the video before that, go and watch that one. Basically, watch all my videos. I'm going crazy now. Stay emotionless out there. I'll see you in the next.